They knocked on my door at 3 a.m. Not the police, no warrant. Just 3 men in tactical vests, carrying AR-15s, claiming to be the Neighborhood Rapid Response Unit. The charge? My fence was 6 inches too tall, but what they didn't know was that behind that door stood my wife, Claire, a former Special Forces sniper with 12 years of combat deployment, and this time, the HOA kicked in the wrong damn door. I remember the exact time because my internal clock, carved into my brain by 7 years in the Marine Corps, woke me precisely 1 second before 3 men in tactical gear kicked in my front door. The wood cracked, glass shattered across the oak floor, and heavy boots thundered onto the tile. I wasn't in a war zone anymore, but my body reacted like I was back in Fallujah. The only problem? These weren't terrorists. They were the Rapid Response Unit of the Pine Ridge Neighborhood Council. All of this? Because my fence was 6 inches too tall. I burst out of the bedroom with my Glock in hand, pure reflex. But I wasn't the only one reacting. My wife Claire was upstairs. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She didn't flinch. She was ready. I used to think I was the most dangerous person in our house. I was wrong. Claire was a sniper in Special Forces, 12 years, 3 combat zones, 19 confirmed kills. She didn't need binoculars to assess a threat. From the second-story landing, Claire settled behind the railing, M110 sniper rifle aimed squarely into the living room. One guy, helmeted, had just stepped into the kill zone. Freeze. Claire's voice rang out, steel scraping stone. "I've got you locked in. Take one more step and you won't live to regret it." The leader froze mid-stride. I saw him. Tactical vest, dark shades, AR-15 slung low. His face shifted from arrogant to terrified in under a second. They had picked the wrong house, and Claire made them realize it faster than a bullet could fly. At that moment, all I could think was, over a damn fence? I thought when I left the military, I'd finally find peace. A quiet home, warm dinners. My daughter is riding her bike on the sidewalk. I was wrong. The enemy wasn't overseas. It was something called the HOA. We had walked into a control system more terrifying than any place I'd ever been deployed. It all started less than 48 hours earlier. The moving truck hadn't even left. The driveway when we got our first knock, not a doorbell. 3 hard knocks. A warning, not a greeting. I opened the door to a tall, wiry man with slicked-back hair that looked shrink-wrapped and eyes cold as ice. He introduced himself. "Malcolm. Crane, president of the Pine Ridge HOA." He shoved a thick stack of documents into my hands so forcefully I nearly lost balance. "This is the community guideline packet, 88 pages. Read it thoroughly tonight. Each violation starts at $500. Then he craned his neck, peering, inside like a prison inspector. "I see you've rearranged the furniture. The sofa shouldn't face the street-facing window. Page 37, section B. Read carefully. I've seen a lot of nonsense in my life, but never a manual on how to place your couch HOA compliant." When Claire walked out from the kitchen, Malcolm's eyes snagged on her like a fishhook. Claire's nearly 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, gaze sharp as a laser sight. "Is this your wife?" He swallowed hard, then mumbled, "I used to be in special ops. Can't talk about it. Classified." I glanced at Claire. She lifted one eyebrow. Her way of signaling an amateur liar detected. After Malcolm left, Claire flipped through the regulation binder. "This isn't a neighborhood council. It's a dictatorship dressed in lawns and white fences." She stopped. At the section regulating Christmas light color and bulb size. 3 full pages. 60% of this probably violates state law." I chuckled. "Maybe just some overzealous paper pushers." Claire looked at me without saying a word. But her eyes were loud and clear. "You haven't seen anything yet, Brian. This is just the beginning." I used to think, if it's just some weird rule books and judgmental stares, it's nothing serious. But I underestimated Malcolm Crane, and I overestimated the decency of what they called a neighborhood council. The next morning, while sipping my coffee, I noticed a bright orange slip shoved under the door. Violation notice. Fine. $500. The charge? Commercial vehicles parked past permitted hours. They meant the moving truck. It had left 3 hours earlier. Claire held the paper, staring at it like she was reading a battlefield map. This isn't a warning. It's a reaction test, she said, voice low and steady. They're checking to see if we'll sit still. I tried to laugh it off, but in the days that followed, the violation storm began. We were fined for trash. Bins are too dark in color. We used the standard black ones. Sunday gathering produced excessive laughter. It was just two friends grilling. Cooking smells of a suspicious nature. Claire made Thai chicken curry. Each notice bore Malcolm's signature, jagged, oversized, as if trying to assert dominance with ink. Claire began taping the notices to the wall of our home office. They're not just targeting us at random, she murmured. They're building a paper trail to legitimize the oppression. Within 3 weeks, we received 26 violation notices, totaling over $4,000 in fines. We were living in a house, quarantined by paperwork, with every trap disguised as a community guideline. The peak came on a Tuesday afternoon. Malcolm showed up personally. He knocked, not to talk, but to hand-deliver the most absurd violation yet. Garden hose improperly coiled poses potential community hazard. I stared at the hose, perfectly looped like a gardening manual illustration. Claire just gave a dry chuckle. He likes power, she muttered. A tin pot dictator in the land of lawns. I started feeling the strain. But Claire? Different story. One afternoon I was working when my phone rang. Claire's voice was calm. Too calm. Don't overreact. But Scott, the HOA's head of security, is in our backyard using a laser measurer on the fence, and he thinks I can't see him. I clenched my jaw. That's trespassing. Call the cops. Claire gave a faint, dangerous laugh, the same one I'd heard before she left for missions. Already recorded. But I haven't called yet. I want to see just how far they'll go. That night, Claire showed me the footage. Scott creeped along the fence, taking photos, scanning. But the terrifying part? When he leaned toward our bedroom window. Listening device, Claire whispered. Military grade, not something a rent-a-cop picks up at Walmart. We found 2 more devices, one under the front porch, one beneath the backyard deck. Claire noted down the serial numbers, cataloged the data. Easily $800 apiece. Encrypted. Remote access is capable, she said. Someone's investing real money to spy on us. By then, any illusion of peaceful living had shattered. It was no longer about absurd tickets or playground power trips. This was war. A civilian terror campaign, methodical and malicious. And we, a former SEAL and a former Special Forces sniper, were not afraid of war. They think we'll be scared. That will back down, Claire said, eyes locked on the window. But they picked the wrong targets. We understood one thing. You can't fight a dictatorship disguised as a neighborhood council alone. This wasn't about fences, hoses, or trash bins anymore. This was a campaign of surveillance, silencing, and control. And if Malcolm Crane wanted to play information warfare, Claire would show him what real psychological operations looked like. I started with what I knew best, technology. I used to be a cybersecurity engineer for a defense contractor. It took me just one night to deploy a counter-surveillance system, hidden cameras around the house, cloud-stored, real-time intrusion alerts, and most importantly, a secure, private network, only accessible to me and Claire. Meanwhile, Claire traced tampering on the router. Conclusion? A sophisticated malware capable of capturing all network traffic. I looked at her. She wasn't surprised. They don't just want to measure our grass, Brian. They're trying to breach our digital lives. The next day, we expanded. The front. Claire reached out to a woman across the street, Elaine Parker, a real estate attorney. She invited us out for coffee in a neighboring town. Safer than sitting in a house wired by rats with surveillance mics, Elaine jokes. Half serious. Then she told us everything. Malcolm collected HOA dues nearly triple the state average, most contracts funneled to Crane Construction, run by his younger brother. The community security team was a private company owned by Malcolm, licensed to carry firearms and use them to intimidate residents. Someone tried to complain once, Elaine said, eyes darkening. Next morning, their house had a notice saying, "Unsafe for community standards." As we walked out of the cafe, Claire was silent. I asked, "What are you thinking?" She didn't even hesitate. "They're not just an HOA. They're an armed profiteering network using civil codes as weapons." Then she looked at me, eyes forged in steel. It's time to build a network. 3 days later, our backyard turned into a training ground. Claire began hosting women's self-defense classes, all fully permitted under city law. Not even Malcolm could shut them down. 5 women showed up for the first time, 12 the second. By the third session, over 20 women from the neighborhood came, including a 70-year-old woman once fined by the HOA for hanging Halloween. Lights too early. "Claire, I'm not here to fight," one said. "But if they're kicking me out over my cat, I'd rather learn how to swing a stick." During breaks, the stories poured out like a waterfall. A couple had their home devalued. After arguing with Malcolm, a single mom fined thousands for planting lavender, not on the approved flora list. One resident had the rapid response team bang on their door at midnight for installing new license plates without notification. Claire took notes, not out of curiosity. She was building a case file and an army. As for me, I built a website, anonymous, called Pine Ridge HOA Transparency. I uploaded HOA financial reports, legally acquired under resident rights, comparisons with state standards, scans of ridiculous violation notices, photos of surveillance equipment, no editorials, just data. Let the corruption speak for itself. After just 3 days, Pine Ridge web traffic had increased tenfold. Elaine helped us draft a formal complaint letter citing state law and demanding full financial disclosure, explanation of contractor, selection processes, complete list of security personnel and permits, all captured on video, hand-delivered to the HOA office. The secretary paled the moment she saw us, eyes darting toward the closed door where Malcolm was in a meeting. The battle lines were drawn. We were no longer the couple fined for the wrong-colored trash bin. We were the center of the resistance. A quiet movement, and I knew it for certain when Claire said that evening. "They think this is a game of bylaws. It's not. They've declared war on someone trained to topple hostile regimes with 3 people and a radio." Malcolm Crane thought he was the only one who knew how to fight with paperwork, policies, and whispers. He hadn't met Claire, and he didn't know that her most dangerous weapon wasn't a rifle. It was information. That night, just as I switched off the light in my office, Claire walked in with a mug of hot tea and an expression colder than winter in Kabul. "It's time to hit the inside," she said, sitting down in front of the whiteboard. She started sketching a web of names, key figures in the HOA Council: Malcolm Crane, President Nancy Wilson, Vice President, known for whisper campaigns, Scott Reynolds, Head of HOA Security, loyal subordinate Mayor Patricia Morgan, political ally in the shadows, and 3 shadowy figures tied to companies that won HOA contracts. I stared at the board silently. Claire wasn't just mapping enemies, she was constructing a demolition plan. Phase 1. Disinformation, counterattack. Claire started planting calculated leaks of misleading info. During her self-defense class, she accidentally mentioned that the IRS was auditing the HOA's expenses. At coffee with a gossip-prone neighbor, she worried aloud that Nancy Wilson might be secretly working with us. I seeded fake messages in a private Pine Ridge social group, hinting that someone inside the HOA was cooperating with the state attorney. Within 72 hours, the results. Malcolm began giving Nancy the cold shoulder. Scott started quietly investigating. Nancy. A finance board member took indefinite personal leave. Phase 2. Open confrontation. Malcolm called an emergency town hall meeting. Claire and I showed up, silent, on time, sat in the back, said nothing. Malcolm stood at the podium like a dictator rattled by a mob. "There are elements threatening the values of our community," he shouted. "We propose an emergency safety protocol granting security entry to any home suspected of serious violations. A rule giving Scott and his thugs warrantless access into people's homes." The room fell dead silent. Claire stood. "Walk to the mic." "Excuse me, just one question before we vote," she said, calm as asking for a coffee refill. Malcolm hesitated. "Yes, go ahead." Claire looked up. "Can you explain why Pine Ridge Security was paid $1.2 million for pool renovations that were independently estimated at $400,000? Murmurs exploded across the room. Malcolm flushed red. "And is it true that the company is owned by your brother, Jared Crane?" She didn't wait for an answer. She held up a photocopy of the business license, stamped by the state. Malcolm stammered. "It's specialized security infrastructure." But he knew. The tide had turned. That very night, the counterattack began. The next morning, our security cameras caught 3 men in HOA uniforms photographing every window of our house with flashlights, like they were planning a break-in. By noon, flyers appeared on every doorstep. "Illegal military training is happening in our community," accompanied by a doctored photo of Claire demonstrating a self-defense move. That afternoon, our internet went out. The house next door had service. So did the one across the street. When we called the provider, they said, "Someone requested termination due to a community safety issue." Claire stared at me, face carved in stone. "They're isolating us, cutting communication, spreading fear, textbook psychological warfare, like suppressing an uprising." I nodded. "And for the first time I felt real fear, not for me, for Claire. Because they were targeting her directly. But they made a fatal mistake. They thought Claire would shrink back into the shadows. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a notepad, and redrew the entire resistance plan. "This isn't a fight about HOA rules anymore," she said. "This is a counterinsurgency against a corrupt armed network. And we're not just going to survive, we're going to flip the board. They couldn't turn the neighbors against us. They couldn't silence Claire in public. They couldn't stop the flood of traffic to the Pine Ridge HOA transparency site, where we posted every shady invoice, every bogus violation, every backdoor, designated contract. And when words failed them, they turned to the one weapon cowards always use when exposed: coercion." GM. I was up first brewing coffee. On the surveillance monitor, I saw them. 3 HOA security officers again, taking photos of every window in our home. This time in broad daylight, no attempt to hide. Scott stood in the middle, clipboard in hand. He wasn't performing for us. He was performing for the neighborhood. He wanted everyone to see and think, that family must be dangerous. 8:30 a.m. Flyers started appearing at every house, every mailbox, every community bulletin board. Unauthorized armed training site in the neighborhood. Photo: Claire demonstrating a defensive stance in a self-defense class. Below, the HOA. Logo and the phrase, "Community safety comes first." By noon, our internet was cut again. The provider claimed there was an emergency request from the residential council to disable service for technical reasons. I switched to 4G, dead. Signal blocked in an oddly specific pattern. Cell service gone. The internet is gone. No emails, no live streams, no way to share evidence. Claire stared at the dead Wi-Fi light. They're digitally isolating us. Objective, paralyze resistance. By evening, we discovered that the HOA transparency site had been hit with a DDoS attack. Expensive, sophisticated, and definitely not amateur. These weren't kids with laptops. This was high-level cyber warfare. At the same time, our power went out. I looked outside. Every other house on the block was lit. Ours? Blacked out. I called the utility company. We received an emergency maintenance order from the Pine Ridge Residential Council. Full inspection required. Estimated 3 to 5 days. Claire stood in the living room, flashlight in hand, its beam catching the razor-sharp glint in her eyes. They're layering the siege: information, power, connectivity, trust. This is a full-spectrum offensive. I nodded. But what worried me more was the neighbors' silence. No one knocked. No one called. No one asked questions. People I once believed were allies now watched us through curtains, like spectators, waiting for a wounded animal to collapse. That night, I heard the engines. Peering through the blinds, I saw Scott and 6 men in black uniforms setting up a checkpoint at the end of our street. They stopped cars, questioned anyone entering or exiting the area near our home. No police, no warrant, no notice, just a rogue squad, armed and ready. Only 2 people crossed that line. Thomas, the frail old veteran carrying a flashlight and a spare power bank, and Elaine clutching a thick stack of documents, her voice hoarse. They're holding an emergency meeting tomorrow night. Topic, internal threat. I'm on the list. She was shaking. But she didn't retreat. We gathered around the dining table, lit by candles. Claire spread out a map for everyone. They think we're broken. But they don't realize this is the moment we've been waiting for. They're making the same mistake every corrupt regime does, underestimating the people they tried to crush. Elaine asked, "How much time do we have?" Claire checked her watch. Exactly 48 hours. Before they move to the next step, forced removal. We need proof. We need witnesses. And we need a counterstrike. Malcolm Crane thought he had us cornered, cutting the power, killing the internet, spreading lies, setting up armed checkpoints. He thought we'd panic, but the truth is, he had done exactly what Claire had been waiting for. He stepped into the final trap she'd laid weeks ago. The next day, our counterstrike began. Claire reached out to her former commanding officer, now a senior agent with the state attorney's office, specializing in public corruption cases. She didn't whine. She just said the right keywords: private weapons, license, internal contracts, embezzled HOA funds. We have evidence. 2 hours later, confirmation came. 2 investigators were assigned specifically to the Pine Ridge case. I contacted an old college friend, now an investigative reporter for the region's top newspaper. He'd been tracking the story quietly for 2 weeks. All he needed from us was hard proof. Video of Scott trespassing at night. Audio pulled from the planted listening devices. Internal emails from Nancy Wilson, HOA vice president, secretly sent to Claire. A full expose series was approved. Headline, Neighborhoods. As Shadow states, when HOAs become armed systems of control. But we weren't done. Thomas, the elderly veteran, had his brother-in-law at the State Private Security Oversight Commission file violations against the Pine Ridge response team, wearing uniforms resembling law enforcement, carrying long guns outside approved parameters, not registered per state regulations. At least 7 chargeable offenses that could result in fines or immediate license revocation. Thomas's brother-in-law messaged back that evening. We called an emergency. Meeting in Elaine's basement. Finned households showed up. Documents in hand, faces tense, but eyes burning with resolve. Claire stood at the center, like a commander rallying her unit before the mission. "We have 48 hours," she began. After that, Malcolm enacts the new policy, forced removal, under the guise of internal security. They will use force if they have to, but if we move first, they won't have a legal leg to stand on. We divided into 3 fronts. Legal. Elaine would file for a full financial audit of the HOA, citing state statutes. Media. I would cut together footage from our security cameras, clips of Scott armed, sneaking, intimidating, and launch a new YouTube channel. HOA Hell, the truth behind the white picket fence. Political. Claire would meet with Mayor Patricia Morgan, the same one who'd ignored every prior complaint. The next morning, I uploaded the first video. Within 3 hours, it had over 12,000 views, just from our county. Comments flooded in. "Can't believe this is America. This is why I hate HOAs. We need new laws. Now." Claire met the mayor at a downtown cafe, conveniently popular with local reporters. She didn't threaten. She laid out documentation of HOA funds transferred to the mayor's campaign. A list of homes forcibly sold, everyone tied to prior HOA complaints. And the kicker, the FBI was now monitoring the case. The mayor's face went from smug to ghost white in 60 seconds. She promised, "I will launch a full investigation into every HOA operating within city limits. Priority, Pineridge." Then came the biggest surprise. Nancy Wilson, the once icy vice president of the HOA, asked to meet privately. She looked exhausted, her eyes sunken. Malcolm, he's planning something big," she confessed. "He knows you haven't sold. He's planning a forced removal using the response team Monday morning," Claire asked. "Why, are you helping us now?" Nancy pulled out an old photo. "My son. He was an addict. Malcolm knew. He used it to control me for years. But this time, I can't be part of it." Nancy handed us a hard drive containing private HOA meeting transcripts, audio of Malcolm discussing a nationally scalable civilian control model, accounting records showing funds funneled through shell companies. Now we had it all. Claire walked up to the operations board and struck a hard red line through the final item. Internal collapse. Complete. Friday morning. We put up a bright for sale sign in our front yard. Bright red, white letters, loud and clear like a surrender flag. I watered the plants like it was any normal day. Claire unplugged the front-facing camera, pretending to start packing. The entire neighborhood buzzed like they'd just watched a heavyweight champ throw in the towel. Malcolm walked by 3 times that same afternoon, chin high like he'd just won the lottery. He even took a picture of the sign and posted it on the HOA forum with the caption, "Sometimes order is restored when conformity triumphs over chaos." He thought he'd won. In reality, we had just activated the final stage of our counterstrike. Uploaded a new video to HOA Hell, inside the armed HOA invasion, caught on camera. It featured clear footage of Scott and 2 others prying open our back door at midnight, carrying black duffel bags. The scene was unmistakable. The guns were unmistakable. There was no denying it. Claire delivered the final political blow and arranged a meeting with Mayor Morgan, not at City Hall but at a cafe frequented by reporters. No threats. No shouting, just a hand-delivered letter from the state attorney's office confirming an official investigation was underway. Attached was a list of HOA contributions funneled into the mayor's re-election campaign. The message was clear: protecting Malcolm, the end of your political career. Claire nodded calmly. "We don't need you to fight, Madam Mayor. We just need you to get out of the way." Nancy Wilson, now our insider, delivered the killing blows. An audio recording of Malcolm saying he'd use the security team to remove any troublemakers by force. Financial records showing HOA money sent to his brother's company, the same day a pool was renovated, a pool no one had ever used. Internal meeting notes where Malcolm proudly said, "We don't need laws when we control the people." Sunday, 11 p.m. We activated the entire surveillance system, flipping on emergency live stream mode. On screen, 4 black SUVs pulled into the HOA office lot. Scott distributed gear, body armor, batons, handguns, radios. They thought they were walking into the home of 2 people who had given up. Instead, they were stepping onto a stage, every camera rolling, every live stream active. 4:42 a.m., Scott led 8 men to our front door. They wore all black uniforms labeled Pine Ridge Community Tactical Unit. I heard Scott's voice boom through a megaphone. "Brian and Claire Whitman, under Emergency Provision 14B, you are being evicted for endangering community safety. Exit the premises within 3 minutes, unarmed." Claire looked at me. "It's time." She hit the red button instantly. Every floodlight around the house lit up, blazing like midday. A speaker blared, "Warning. This property is under federal surveillance. Any armed trespassing is a federal offense." The YouTube live stream and the neighborhood forum began broadcasting the full scene, live. Scott froze. But from his radio, Malcolm's voice screamed, "Proceed! They're bluffing!" Scott raised a battering ram. And right then, a beautiful sound. Police sirens. 3 unmarked SUVs came tearing in from the opposite direction. FBI, County Sheriff, State Security Task Force. Agents leapt out, weapons drawn. "Drop your weapons! Get on the ground! Don't move!" Scott's face turned, white as chalk. 7 of his response team lay face down, hands behind their heads. Then Malcolm arrived. He screeched to a stop just in time to see his team being cuffed. He jumped out, screaming, "This is my neighborhood! You have no authority here!" A female officer, calm, in command, stepped forward. "Oh, we know exactly who you are, Mr. Crane, and that's exactly the problem." By noon, the footage was on national news. Headlines lit up. Armed HOA security team dissolved in illegal. Raid. Former operative exposes corrupt HOA network. HOA empire crumbles. Residents liberated. And in that moment, I knew. The battle was over. But the victory was just beginning. 3 months after that morning of FBI sirens and handcuffs, the Pine Ridge neighborhood looked like a completely different place. No more rapid response teams in tactical gear blocking kids from biking. No more violation notices taped to doors every time someone planted the wrong kind of flower. And most importantly, no more shadow of Malcolm Crane, the man who once declared, "I am the law here." Malcolm was sentenced to 8 years in prison for misappropriation of public assets, operating an unauthorized armed force, organized fraud. Scott Mad Dog. Reynolds got 5 years for unlawful entry and impersonating a law enforcement officer. Nancy Wilson, though she cooperated, was fined administratively. But she did the right thing when it counted. Thomas, the old war vet, was honored as Pine Ridge's first ever citizen of distinction. And Claire and me, we didn't move away like the rumors said. Instead, we were elected co-chairs of the New Residents Association in the first free and transparent election held in over 15 years. Elaine, the real estate attorney, served as legal advisor. Thomas was made a lifetime honorary member. And the very first rule we passed? No one is allowed to point a gun at their neighbor, and all regulations must receive 2/3 majority approval. In writing. The first morning, I stepped on the porch under the new administration. I saw things I once thought were luxuries. 2 kids riding bikes on the sidewalk without being chased off by Scott for not having HOA-approved helmets. The elderly lady at house number 6 planting bright purple tulips, a color once banned, now blooming in full glory. The man once fined for throwing a barbecue, building a full-blown BBQ pit in his front yard. Claire sat on the steps, hot coffee in hand. She didn't smile often, but that day she did. We published the HOA Resistance Manual, a guidebook for other communities on how to detect, resist, and dismantle corrupt HOAs. Within 6 weeks, it was downloaded over 90,000 times. We received letters from all over the country. Thank you for standing up when everyone else was afraid. I thought I was going crazy. Turns out I wasn't alone. I live in a light version of Pine Ridge. I'm not staying silent anymore. Mayor Morgan, fearing for her re-election, filed and passed a new citywide HOA reform policy, now known as the Pine Ridge Rules. It mandated that all HOAs must maintain financial transparency limit enforcement authority, ban use of armed security or unapproved private enforcement firms. To celebrate, we threw the biggest BBQ Pine Ridge had ever seen. Right there, on the very lawn, Malcolm once fined us for having uneven shades of green. Thomas brought the old HOA bylaws, now framed a relic of the dark era, and I planted a new sign at the neighborhood entrance. HOA, happiness for all, no tyrants needed. As the sun set behind the maples, I sat next to Claire. Her hand resting gently on my shoulder, I whispered, "Never thought leaving the military would lead me to start." "A civil rebellion," she chuckled. "Sometimes, the battlefield isn't a jungle or a desert. It's a white picket fence and an 87-page handbook." Then she glanced out at the neighbors laughing. "And victory doesn't come from how many guns you bring, Dot. It comes from who lays the right pieces before the first shot is fired. Malcolm brought guns to the war. We brought justice. And that's what freed not just our home, but an entire community that had been living in fear. From a couple threatened with eviction, we led the HOA uprising, and we took back our neighborhood. And if you're hearing this from inside a house with an 87-page community rule book, just remember, you are not alone, and you don't have to endure it forever.